After all the damage All For One has endured in the fight against Endeavor and the other heroes, he is now speeding up to go to Shigaraki and complete the transformation. If the Demon Lords reunite, no one could stand against them. With the fact that there's no other hero to stop All For One or even slow him down, All Might steps forward and stands in his way. All Might knows that Shigaraki's hatred has spread to All For One's body, which means he won't be able to ignore him and he'll go straight to UA. As All Might remembers what Night Eye and Nana said to him, the suitcase and his car start transforming into a suit similar to the Hulkbuster. The suit is called Armored All Might, and the fight between All For One and All Might starts. As All Might prepare to attack, All For One attacks first with a long-range attack. All Might successfully defends using Red Hercules. However, Hercules' armor's integrity has been depleted by 66%, so All Might will not survive another hit. All Might smiles and attacks All For One, destroying his hand. As All For One starts to regenerate his arm, All Might neutralizes him with an artificial black whip and attacks with Charge Bolt. And just a note here, most of All Might's attacks are inspired by the quirks of students of Class 1A. For instance, Black Whip is Deku's ability and Charge Bolt is Kaminari's attack. Now, back to the fight. As other pieces of armor fly towards All Might and assemble around his leg, he says, "Ever since your final battle against my master, you've always begun with a clumsy, long-range attack. After you weaken your opponent, you steal their quirk. But that strategy only works against someone who has a quirk. I wanted a chance to fight one last time, so I came up with this suit and asked that it be made for me. I'll use the gifts bestowed on me to smash you once and for all, so you should know that I never go into a fight thinking I will lose." Here, All Might is doing three things. First, he is provoking All For One to make him waste more time on him. Second, he is using All For One's technique against him. Usually, All For One is the one who's talking and shaking the will of his opponents, and we'll see. All Might do this a lot during this fight. Third, the author is setting the correct expectation for us. All Might is fighting to win, not just to gain time. All Might then uses the shoot style to attack as he provokes All For One even more. However, All For One counterattacks by combining 6 quirks in one attack. As All Might recovers from the attack, he notes that his trash talk is working. All Might uses Utility Cape, Auto Guard, Dark Shadow to fly and attack. All For One. At the same time, multiple rockets are assembled and launched from All Might's car. All Might successfully injects All For One with Pinky Super Acid, and even though All For One is constantly rewinding, the acid continues to corrode him from the inside out. And All Might asks, "Who is the trash now?" All For One responds with a direct hit and sends All Might flying. The suit and All Might has sustained a lot of damage from the attack. However, he notes that All For One is a bit younger, so to remove the Pinky Acid, he had to constantly injure himself with his quirks, so the more damage he takes, the faster he is forced to rewind. Next, more armor pieces fly from the car toward All Might, and we get the evolution of Armored All Might, taking inspiration from Uravity, Ingenium, Froppy, Shoto, and Tailman. All For One attacks and destroys the building All Might was standing on, but All Might easily avoids the attack because this evolution of the suit allows All Might to move faster and with more liberty. As All Might plans for his next move, All For One pursues him. He then attacks All Might and says, "I know what you're planning. I'll turn that grin of yours into one of pure agony without going all out. I'll kill you with minimal effort." All Might avoids the attacks and jumps upwards. However, All For One anticipated this move, and he attacks All Might with these 2 big monsters and taunts him at the same time saying, "What happened to your smile? Now you're just a gutless old fart. Using those children's quirks to keep your appearance, did you think they would protect you? Your light is far gone." All Might, while preparing his attack, responds by saying, "Oh buddy, you still don't get it at all. People are flickering beings. Even if my light goes out, someone else will take it and keep it shining, allowing me to light my fire again. I don't plan on losing, you better remember my name." All Might attacks from the sky with a massive laser beam. The system informs All Might that the engines are overheating and the battery is depleting. All Might orders it to not stop and keep shooting. All Might says, Star's final battle inspired me, yet solidifying the lasers like she did is beyond this suit's capabilities. On the other side, All For One tries to escape from the lasers, however. All Might uses sound waves, earphone jack, and he prevents him from escaping the blast. All Might then explains that when the laser was shot, he had to sacrifice Tentacle and flew using the thrusters, and the armor inspired by Invisible Girl's quirk makes him a bit resistant to heat. All Might adds that he intentionally got hit by All For One's punch so he could set this attack up. He shielded himself with Tailman, but his legs are in tatters. He also says, "You must have avoided aiming for my head so you could see me agonize in pain. Yet, thanks to that, I'm still kicking, you fool." All For One furiously attacks All Might, but All Might responds by using Armor Morphin, Creati, and he creates Binding Spheres, Grape Juice, and he says, "I can't hit you any harder than that, so please just vanish before joy stops numbing the pain." The laser stops shooting and it looks like the fight is over, but unfortunately, All For One is still alive. We see that he regressed heavily in age. He is like a little boy now, and he says to All Might, "I told you, tools cannot surpass their limits. Aren't you supposed to be smiling, dear friend?" All Might notes that his body is shining, and as All For One tries to finish off All Might, he is shocked that he can't move. Stain is here, and he was able to lick some of All For One's blood from a rock, and that's why All For One can't move. As this is happening, we understand that after eavesdropping on Leader and Shoto, Stain understands what All Might is trying to do. He then follows the trail of destruction to find All Might. Stain found some blood, and to make sure it was not All Might's, he smelled it and compared it to the smell of All Might at Kamino. Stain and All Might both rush to finish All For One. Stain excitingly says, "All Might! Oh, All Might! You get it by now, don't you? The reason why I bared my soul to you. A hero can only claim that title as long as his soul burns in service of others. You should live. Then come for the life of Stain, the man who murdered 40 heroes." As Stain and All Might close in on All For One, but before the two can land their attack, All For One uses forced activation and phlebotomy to draw out all the blood in his body and as a shield to defend against Stain and All Might. All For One explains to Stain, "I knew you were up to something. I have been preparing some countermeasures since that day at Tartarus. You were the only one to refuse my help and leave on your own." Stain tries to attack again and says, "So what? This is still your blood." However, All For One uses a third quirk antigen modification to rewrite his blood composition, which sets him free to move, and a giant mouth shoots from his back to bite Stain and throws him through the city. And this was a really massive throw. All For One then tracks Stain and he says, "I'll be stealing you Blood Curdle quirk. Now that I think about it, you were crucial to Tamura's and the League's growth, but that's when your role ended." But Stain replies, "You're wrong. It's all part of a bigger process, Mr. Demon Lord. I never graduated from high school. You were the one who taught me the meaning of being a hero. Win this and keep living, All Might. My..." But before he completes the sentence, and as All Might is rushing to save him, All For One delivers the final blow and kills Stain. Immediately after that, All For One turns to All Might and blasts him with a hyper-concentrated beam of energy. But at the last second, the last remaining parts of Hercules' shield All Might and barely protect him from the blast. As a defeated and heavily injured All Might lies down on the ground, he sees a vision of Nana talking to him. She says, "Toshinori, do your best. It's not over yet. Keep at it, Toshinori." All Might then gets another vision of Night Eye talking to him, but he understands that this is just a hallucination. It's All Might trying to encourage himself. His support items and legs are gone, so he can't fight anymore, but he doesn't quit and he shouts to All For One, "I am not dead yet, so come!" However, and for the first time during this fight, All For One attention has shifted as he realizes that he is now close enough to Shigaraki to use his gloop warp. All For One says, "Getting here has been my goal ever since I injected myself with Rewind. Now I can give the synthetic copy of All For One to Tamura. Then finally, he will become a stronger version of me." On the other hand, All Might attempts to distract All For One, but apparently, after changing his blood, All For One has cooled down and he doesn't pay any attention to All Might. and instead of teleporting to Shigaraki and giving Deku a chance to interfere, All For One attempts to teleport Shigaraki instead. So All For One uses Gloop Warp to teleport Shigaraki, but as the goo starts coming out of Shigaraki's mouth, he closes his mouth and refuses to teleport. And All For One understands that Shigaraki's consciousness has overcome his. So, All For One grabs All Might by the leg and starts flying towards Shigaraki and Deku. All For One says, "Show them how pathetic you look right now, and pay for the crime of encouraging their dreams." But All Might, with all of his remaining power, attacks All For One and grabs his neck with his arm that still has part of the support arm gauntlet on it. All For One is in shock, and he remembers the fight against Nana. He is confused about why he is now seeing the last moments of the battle against Nana now. All For One thinks to himself, that fool of a woman put her stupid ideals first, without the power to back them up, and then she died such a pathetic death. He also remembers Nana's last words. She said, "All For One, All Might will be the one to defeat you because he's going to blow himself up. Toshinori is even crazier than you." Back to the present, All Might asks, "If you die again, you'll rewind back to a kindergartner, right?" But just before the gauntlet explodes, All For One negates it with his spikes and says to All Might, "Did you really think I would let you die like a hero? You finally used all your tricks." All For One then licks All Might's blood and uses Stain's quirk blood curdle, completely paralyzing All Might, and he says, "Wounded heroes are always the scariest. I know that very well. But now you can't move a single muscle. Yes, that's the face I wanted to see when you're at your lowest point." The entire world is watching as All For One is going to deliver the final blow to All Might. But Gentle, after stabilizing UA, tries to help All Might. However, All For One shoots an energy beam and destabilizes UA again, forcing Gentle to stay put and focus on saving UA. At the same time, Star's jet pilots attack All For One, but All For One easily destroys them with raw strength. With no one around to save All Might, the entire world watches in horror as the symbol of peace is being murdered. All For One raises All Might above his head, as the entire world is crying and praying for someone to save All Might. As Midoriya turns his head, he sees one man standing on the barely floating UA. This man is none other than the explosion murder god, Dynamite himself, Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo is barely standing upright and completely covered in blood, but he is our last hope to save All Might. And we get a vision of a young, happy Deku and Bakugo holding All Might cards, and All Might is watching them, symbolizing the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. On the other side, we get a flashback to when Night Eye foresaw All Might's future. He warns All Might that he'll encounter another villain. What awaits All Might is an unspeakably gruesome death. Now back to the present, as All For One is about to finish All Might, Bakugo jumps and he is flying towards Deku. Without any hesitation, Deku pushes Shigaraki and grabs Bakugo's hand. Together, using their combined speed and strength, the two heroes spin in the air and build momentum, preparing to perform the explode apol technique. This is the same technique they used in the Heroes Rising movie, but instead of Deku, this time it's Bakugo who is being launched as Deku uses the full power of Gear Shift to propel Bakugo with insane speed towards All For One. It even looks like Bakugo broke the sound barrier. Shigaraki taunts Deku by saying, "He won't make it in time. You know it, right? The All Might inside of you used to be just a formless silhouette. They don't appear like their true form while they're alive, right? But now, he started looking like his real self, didn't he? The death of the man who brought dreams to this world will bring reality back." Time seems to freeze as Bakugo is flying towards All For One and the entire world is watching. At the absolute last moment, Bakugo saves All Might and rips off both of All For One's hands in the process. Bakugo shouts, "We'll win this." This is how the All Might versus All for One fight ends and the Bakugo versus All For One fight starts.